In the endless dark of space, the Overth flagship Spear of Dusk drifted like a shadow between the stars. Its black armor drank in the light from a nearby blue nebula, making the warship almost invisible against the void. On the bridge, Captain Vorn sat high in his command chair, his 4 eyes fixed on the tactical display. For hours, there had been nothing but the quiet hum of engines and the faint chatter of crew at their stations, until the sensor alarm broke the silence. "Contact, Captain," called the navigation officer, his voice calm but alert. "Bearing 017. Faint metallic return." Vorn leaned forward, mandibles twitching in mild interest. "Show me." The display shifted to reveal a small object drifting on the edge of their scan range. It wasn't moving fast, only creeping along a lazy course. Its hull gleamed faintly in the nebula's light, dull metal with no shields, no visible energy signature. "Artificial," the science officer confirmed after a moment. "Steel plating, chemical propulsion. No sign of advanced drives. Crude design. Old-fashioned." A low chuckle rumbled from Vorn's chest. Another relic from some forgotten race. The Overth Empire had seen hundreds of such vessels during its long reign. Weak, slow, and vulnerable ships from primitive civilizations who had dared to wander into the wrong region of space. Most surrendered at the first hail. The few who fought were erased in minutes. "Any defensive systems?" Vorn asked, though he already knew the answer. "None detected, Captain," came the reply. "No energy shielding. No plasma weapons. Hull composition. Primitive alloys, welded together in crude fashion." Vorn gave a slow nod. "Very well. Begin a deep scan. I want every detail before we decide how to proceed." The Spear of Dusk scanners came alive, invisible beams sweeping over the tiny vessel. Data streamed across the consoles, temperature readings, structural analysis, atmospheric composition. The Overth could see almost everything about their target without being detected. "Crew complement, approximately 180, the science officer reported. "Bipedal species, carbon-based, nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. Height average 1.8 meters. So small." One of the weapons officers muttered, his voice filled with disdain. "And fragile," added the biologist, examining skeletal scans. "Light bone structure, low muscle density, likely slow and weak. No natural armor." The crew traded amused glances. People like that wouldn't last a day in Overth territory. But then something unusual appeared in the data feed. The ship's primitive computers were storing a massive amount of information, far more than seemed necessary for such a small vessel. "Captain," the science officer said slowly, "I've accessed one of their data banks. It's unusual." "Explain." "There are thousands of files. Historical records, diagrams, simulations. Most are military." Vorn turned in his chair. "Military? For a vessel this primitive?" "Yes, Captain. Detailed accounts of battles, weapon designs, strategic doctrines. The scale of some of these conflicts is considerable." "Conflicts with whom?" "Other species." The officer hesitated. "No, Captain. With themselves. All of them." Vorn's eyes narrowed. "You're saying they've been at war with their own kind? For thousands of years. Continually. On a scale I have never seen among primitives. Some of these battles, millions of casualties." The bridge grew quiet. Even among the Overth, born and bred for conquest, such numbers were staggering. "They fought these wars without advanced weapons?" Vorn asked. "Yes, but they made them devastating. Chemical weapons, biological plagues, mass bombardment. Even with simple tools, they learned to kill in ways that are disturbingly efficient." Vorn said nothing for a long moment. His clawed fingers tapped against the arm of his chair as the ship's scanners continued their work. The drifting vessel looked harmless. Its engines were crude. Its armor was laughable. But inside, every detail told another story. "Continue the scan," he ordered at last. "I want to know exactly what kind of creature turns its own world into a battlefield for millennia." More data poured in. Their ship wasn't just wandering, it was patrolling. Its systems were old, but refined to near perfection. The crew wasn't relaxed, they were in constant readiness. There were no signs of scientists, traders, or civilians aboard. Every biological scan showed the same result: these beings were trained for combat. Vorn's mandibles twitched again, but this time, there was no amusement in his expression. He remembered an old Overth proverb whispered among veterans: the most dangerous predator is the one that survives its own kind. The human ship continued to drift slowly, as if unaware it was being studied. But Vorn couldn't shake the strange feeling growing in his chest, that they were not the only hunters in this part of space. "Captain," the communications officer said suddenly, "I think I know why their computers hold so much military data. They are running constant simulations. Training. Adapting." Vorn's eyes flicked toward him. "On a patrol ship?" "Yes, Captain. And..." The officer hesitated before continuing. "They have first contact protocols. Not for peaceful greetings. For hostile encounters." The captain sat back slowly, his mind turning over the possibilities. Primitive technology, ancient engines, fragile bodies, but a mind for war honed sharper than any blade. "Keep watching them," Vorn said quietly, his voice carrying an edge the crew had never heard from him before. "I want to know if they've noticed us." The science officer looked up from his console, his face pale. "Captain, they have." That's when the human ship began to turn. Not drifting now, deliberate, purposeful, straight toward the Spear of Dusk. The bridge of the Spear of Dusk was silent except for the steady hum of systems and the faint beeps from the scanners. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the display as the human vessel's slow turn continued. It was not a random drift or a lazy adjustment. This was controlled, deliberate, as though the ship had chosen its path with care. The angle of the turn brought its bow directly toward them, even though they were cloaked and thousands of kilometers away. "They cannot see us," the navigator whispered, more as if trying to convince himself than stating a fact. "Our stealth field is intact." Vorn did not answer. He watched the movement on the screen. There was a patience to it, like a predator angling itself before a strike. The human ship's thrusters fired in precise bursts, too controlled to be anything but intentional. "Captain," the sensor officer said quietly, "I believe they have switched their communication channels. The data stream is now encrypted and the pattern matches military codes." The crew shifted uneasily in their seats. Switching to military encryption meant they were no longer conducting casual ship business. It meant they were preparing for something. "Can you break the encryption?" Vorn asked. "Not quickly," the officer admitted. "It is sophisticated, more advanced than expected for their level of technology. I would need hours to decode it." Vorn's eyes narrowed. "What are they hiding?" "Possibly coordination orders, sir. Or..." The officer hesitated. "Combat instructions." The science officer leaned in toward his console. "Captain, I am detecting changes in their energy output. Small at first, but building steadily. I believe they are running multiple systems tests." "What systems?" "Point defense, missile racks, railguns. They are checking readiness across their arsenal. And..." He adjusted the readings again. "They are running simulations in their onboard computers." Vorn turned sharply toward him. "Simulations? What kind?" "Combat. Dozens of them. Different angles of attack, evasive maneuvers, defense against multiple ship classes. It appears they are building a response plan in real time." The captain felt his claws curl against the armrest. "They are preparing for us," he said flatly. Still, the technology remained primitive. Against the firepower of the Spear of Dusk, they would not stand a chance in a direct engagement. But something about their behavior gnawed at him. They were not moving like prey. They were acting like something that had faced predators before and survived. The communications officer interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, I've intercepted part of their open channel chatter before they switched encryption." It was brief, but it was enough. "Play it." The bridge filled with a crisp, firm voice. Even through translation, it was calm and professional. "All weapons systems green. Point defense online. Readiness time, 36 seconds to full combat. The recording ended, leaving a heavy silence. 36 seconds. That was faster than many Overearth warships. And these were supposed to be primitives. The science officer broke the silence again, his voice tense. Captain, I have been studying their historical records further. Their wars were not random. They were structured with strategy and planning equal to any advanced species. After each conflict, they analyzed every detail, victories and defeats alike, making improvements for the next battle. Adaptive, Vorn murmured. Yes, and relentless. They do not stop preparing even in peace. Their training simulations have no end. They wargamed scenarios against stronger foes long before they encountered any. Vorn felt a weight settle in his chest. You think they have planned for an enemy like us? I believe so, Captain. They may even have expected this day. The navigator spoke again, her voice low. Sir, their course will bring them into optimal missile range in under 20 minutes. Vorn's eyes locked on the tactical display. The humans were not accelerating toward them. They were simply gliding into a position where they could strike if they wished. It was not an act of fear, it was posturing. Captain, the weapons officer said, should we prepare our main batteries? Vorn hesitated. The logical response to a possible threat was to arm and be ready. But something told him the humans were watching for that exact reaction. If he powered weapons first, it might trigger them to act. Not yet, he said slowly. Hold defensive systems on standby, but no offensive charge. The weapons officer looked uneasy but obeyed. The sensor officer called out again. Sir, there's something else. I am detecting faint bursts of data transmissions from the human ship. They are highly compressed, sent across dozens of different frequencies at once. Destination: unknown. The encryption is too strong, but the volume is significant. They could be sending detailed information about us to others. The thought sent a chill through the crew. If there were other human ships nearby, they might now know the exact location and composition of the Spear of Dusk. How far could they be sending it? Vorn asked. Light speed, sir. Within several light years, depending on relays. Vorn's mind raced. If this vessel was part of a patrol network, reinforcements could already be on their way. And if those reinforcements carried the same instincts, the same cold preparation, this was no longer a routine encounter. The human ship adjusted its course again. This time it was a slow arc, not toward them directly, but into a pattern that forced the Overearth vessel into a predictable position if it continued to shadow them. It was a hunter's move, creating a trap without revealing it. Captain, the science officer said. The human vessel held its course, the faint glow of its engines barely disturbing the darkness. But every scan from the Spear of Dusk showed the ship was alive with activity. Inside its metal shell, systems were powering up, shutting down, and shifting in patterns that made no sense to the Overearth analysts. It was like trying to read the movements of a predator you'd never seen before, a creature that didn't move according to any hunting style you knew. Captain, the engineering officer spoke from his station. I have completed another layer of scan on their hull. It is not as simple as it looks. Vorn turned toward him. Explain. They have layered armor. The outer layer disperses energy weapon impacts. The middle layer absorbs kinetic force. The innermost layer seems designed to block radiation and chemical contamination. 3 defenses in one hull. That is not primitive design, the science officer added. That is deliberate construction for fighting multiple kinds of threats. Whoever built this expects to face enemies with many different weapons. The crew shifted uneasily. A peaceful patrol ship did not need armor like that. The biology officer joined in, his voice quiet. And every life form aboard shows signs of high physical conditioning. Their muscle mass is above average for their body type, and their bone density suggests regular exposure to high stress on their frames. That is not the body of a civilian. Those are soldiers. The bridge felt colder. Soldiers on a patrol vessel meant one of two things. Either they expected trouble in every mission, or they intended to find it. Vorn's mind moved to a darker possibility. What is their psychological profile? The biology officer hesitated before answering. Controlled. Conditioned. Their neural patterns show preparation for extreme stress. Every individual is trained to remain functional even in direct threat of death. Vorn's eyes narrowed. Every individual? Yes, Captain. This is not a mixed crew of specialists. This is a combat-ready team. All of them. The captain leaned back, his claws drumming against the arm of his chair. If the humans were all warriors, then this ship, small though it was, could act like a blade in the dark, fast and precise. The communications officer broke in. Sir, they have altered their encryption again. It is now switching in timed intervals. The pattern is irregular, likely to prevent interception. But more importantly, the intervals match a military protocol for fleet coordination. Vorn straightened. Fleet coordination? There is only one ship here. That we can see, Captain, the officer replied. If there are others beyond our sensor range, they could already be maneuvering. The bridge grew tense again. An enemy you could see was dangerous. An enemy you couldn't see was worse. The science officer added another layer to the unease. Captain, their propulsion system. It is chemical, yes, but I have never seen such efficiency. They have optimized thrust, heat dispersal, and fuel use to the point where it rivals some of our older fusion drives. And it is completely silent to our passive sensors unless we are close. Vorn absorbed this quietly. They had taken old, outdated technology and turned it into something lean, sharp, and quiet. That was not the work of a species that had only just learned to travel space. That was the work of a species that had fought with whatever it could get, and learned how to win with it. The human vessel shifted again, moving into a slow spiral pattern. The movement was subtle but unmistakable to trained eyes. It was the kind of maneuver that kept a ship's sensors sweeping every angle without making it obvious they were watching. The navigator looked up from her console. Captain, that pattern... It's often used to look for cloaked ships. Vorn's jaw tightened. They are searching for us. They shouldn't be able to detect us, the navigator said quickly, but her voice held no conviction. The science officer spoke again, his voice lower than before. Unless they are not looking for the usual signs. They could be searching for the distortions in radiation or gravity fields, the small changes that any mass in space will cause. If they have spent thousands of years fighting enemies who hide, they might have developed detection methods we do not understand. The human vessel's movements slowed, and then it straightened its course, directly toward the Spear of Dusk's current position. Distance to interception point? Vorn asked. 17 minutes, Captain, the navigator replied. Vorn did not like how quickly that answer came. The weapons officer's voice was taut. Shall I ready the primary batteries now? Vorn hesitated. Standard Overth doctrine would demand a show of force. But everything about this ship told him that any sign of aggression would be met with an immediate and calculated response. These humans would not panic, they would act. Not yet, he said firmly. Hold defenses ready, but keep weapons cold. The bridge crew obeyed, though their tension was clear. They were used to being the threat, not the ones calculating the threat from another. The communications officer spoke again. Captain, I've intercepted a burst from their new encrypted pattern. The only part not coded is the signal header. It is a fleet address. How many recipients? Dozens, the officer replied. Possibly hundreds. It meant their presence was no longer a secret. Somewhere out there, human ships now had their location, their ship type, and possibly their weaknesses. Vorn's eyes fixed on the image of the human vessel. It was still small on the display, still slow, still unthreatening in appearance. But every move, every signal, every layer of its armor, every soldier aboard spoke of a truth the scans could not fully measure. This was not a ship to take lightly. And the worst part was the thought he kept pushing away but could not ignore. If this was only a light patrol ship, somewhere out there were heavier ships, faster ships, stronger ships, all crewed by the same kind of warriors. 17 minutes until they met face to face, and for the first time in his long career, Captain Vorn was not certain whether he wanted to see what would happen when they did. The minutes passed slowly on the bridge of the Spear of Dusk, each one tightening the knot in the air. The human vessel kept its steady approach, never rushing, never drifting off course. It moved like something that knew exactly where its prey was, even though its prey believed itself hidden. The glowing blue nebula behind them cast faint light across the Overth crew's faces, making their unease even more visible. "Captain, the human ship has adjusted speed," the navigator said quietly. "Slight acceleration. They'll reach optimal weapons range in 12 minutes. Vorn's claws tapped once against the arm of his chair. "Still no weapons powered?" The weapons officer checked his display. "Correct, Captain. No main weapons active. Only point defense grids and smaller close-range systems. It's defensive, but ready." Defensive, Vorn thought, could mean many things. Could mean they wanted to appear non-threatening. Or it could mean they were baiting the Spear of Dusk into making the first move. The humans seemed to excel at creating layers of meaning. "Captain," the communications officer spoke suddenly. Another burst transmission from them, this time with different frequency bands, still encrypted. "But I believe they are sending tactical data." "To where?" Vorn asked sharply. The officer shook his head. "Unknown. Could be to nearby ships or even long-range relays. But the size of the packets, it's more than a simple warning. It's detailed." Vorn leaned back slowly. "They're feeding someone everything they know about us." The science officer's voice cut in. "Captain, our scans show an unusual spike in their computer core activity. It appears they are running simulations again, this time specifically focused on our weapons and movement patterns." Vorn's eyes narrowed. "They're studying us in real time." "Yes, Captain. Every reading says they are mapping out dozens of possible engagements. They are already testing responses to our potential attacks before we have even fired a shot." The bridge was silent for a moment. The thought of a supposedly primitive ship building strategies against one of the most feared warships in Overth space was enough to unsettle even the most seasoned crew. Then, without warning, the human ship shifted its formation. Lights along its hull glimmered faintly as it broke from its straight approach and began a new path, a slow curve that would place it directly on the Spear of Dusk's flank if left unchallenged. The navigator frowned. "They're moving into a tactical offset position. That's a maneuver to give them multiple attack angles." Vorn didn't like it. "Helm, adjust bearing to maintain distance. Do not let them pin us." The helmsman obeyed, the Spear of Dusk shifting gently through the black. But the human vessel matched the adjustment within moments, altering its own path with unnerving precision. It was like they could predict every movement before it happened. "They're reading us," the science officer said under his breath. The communications officer's console chimed again. "Captain, they've switched to a high-frequency burst mode. The pattern matches, active scanning." "They're scanning us?" Vorn asked, his tone sharp. "Yes, Captain. Full spectrum sweep. They're mapping our armor composition, shield harmonics, and weapon placements." For a moment, no one moved. That was a dangerous shift. Up until now, the humans had been quiet, watching, preparing. Now they were openly looking right back. The weapons officer's hands hovered over the controls. "Permission to arm main cannons, Captain?" Vorn hesitated. Every instinct as a warship commander told him to show strength, to make clear who held the power. But this situation was not following the old rules. These humans didn't seem to fear the larger ship. If anything, they appeared to welcome an escalation. "Negative," Vorn said at last. "We keep offensive systems cold. They must not think we're the ones starting this." The weapons officer's mandibles clicked in frustration, but he obeyed. Then, almost as if in answer, the human vessel made another move. Panels along its hull opened, revealing gun barrels and missile ports that had been invisible before. Small flashes of energy shimmered around them, point defense grids coming online. Their weapon locks were not targeting the Spear of Dusk, but the message was unmistakable. They were ready. "They're showing us their teeth," the science officer murmured. The bridge felt tighter, the air heavier. The humans were not charging forward or firing wildly. They were positioning, preparing, and studying, like predators who had chosen their moment but not yet decided if the kill was worth it. "Captain," the communications officer said suddenly, Incoming transmission, open channel. It's audio only. Vorn's head snapped toward him. Language. Unknown at first. Wait. Translation filters are adjusting. Captain. They are speaking in Overth High Command dialect. The crew stared. The humans should not even have had access to that language, let alone spoken it fluently. Play it, Vorn ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was calm, deliberate, and carried the kind of certainty that made even veteran warriors pause. Captain Vorn of the Overth vessel Spear of Dusk, it said. This is Captain Maravance of the human ship Resolute. We have been aware of your presence for 2 hours and 32 minutes. We wish to avoid unnecessary conflict. However, we are fully prepared for engagement if required. The bridge was silent, every crew member processing the same realization. These humans had known they were there from the very beginning. Vorn felt his claws curl into the armrests. They've been watching us longer than we've been watching them. The human vessel held its position now, matching the Spear of Dusk's speed and trajectory with unnerving precision. The gap between them was steady, close enough for both ships to strike but far enough to avoid accidental collision. The science officer's voice broke the tense quiet. Captain, there's something else. They are running live simulations of our ship in their computers. Dozens at once. They are testing different ways we might attack and how to counter each one. Vorn felt the weight of that sink in. So by the time we make a move, they will have already run the scenario 100 times. Yes, Captain. They are preparing for every possibility. The human ship's external lights flashed briefly, 3 sharp pulses, then went dark again. The communications officer frowned at his console. That was not random. It's a short-range signal code, a challenge response format. Meaning, they are letting us know they are in control of this distance, and they are watching for our reply. Vorn considered this. The humans were not here by accident. They had chosen the moment to reveal themselves, and they were shaping the encounter like a strategist moving pieces on a game board. Then the voice of Captain Maravance returned over the comm. Captain Vorn, I recommend we speak directly. We both have the means to cause damage neither of us can easily recover from. I'd rather avoid that. Her voice was steady, unhurried. Not the voice of someone trying to bluff, but of someone certain of their position. Vorn opened a channel, the main screen shifting to reveal the inside of the Resolute's bridge. The humans were smaller than his crew, their skin pale under the cool light, but their eyes were sharp and calm. Captain Vance stood at the center, hands folded behind her back, surrounded by officers who moved with quiet discipline. You've made your position clear, Vorn said, his voice level. But you are outmatched in technology, size, and firepower. Why risk this? Vance met his gaze without flinching. Because being outmatched is nothing new to us, Captain. We've fought those who were bigger, faster, stronger, and we learned how to win anyway. Vorn studied her for a long moment. You think you can win against us? I think, she said, her tone still calm, that if you try to conquer us, you will pay more than you are willing to lose. It was not shouted. It was not wrapped in threats or bluster. It was stated like a fact, one she believed so completely that the weight of it settled over the entire Overth bridge. Captain, the communications officer whispered to Vorn, our scanners detect multiple incoming warp signatures from the direction of their territory. Large vessels. How large? 2 heavy-class warships, several cruisers, and multiple support craft. Arrival, less than an hour. And as the human voice faded, a single thought gripped him more than any other. If they had planned this meeting, if they had been preparing this entire time, then perhaps this encounter was not one the Overth had control over at all. The bridge of the Spear of Dusk was so silent that Vorn could hear the faint vibration of the deck under his boots. The human transmission still echoed in his mind, the calm tone of Captain Mara Vance ringing with quiet certainty. They hadn't been startled. They hadn't been confused. They had been waiting. The science officer's console chimed again. Captain, the human vessel has dropped its energy masking. They're showing us their full power signature. The main screen shifted, and for the first time the true readings of the Resolute filled the display. The ship's systems were far more active than the Overth had assumed. Heat levels spiked across its hull, weapons arrays were fully charged, and its electronic warfare systems were humming at full capacity. "They are locking scans onto us," the communications officer reported. "Not just basic readings, they're running detailed sweeps of our armor, shields, and weapons placement." The weapons officer's mandibles clicked. "They are targeting us, Captain." Vorn raised a clawed hand to stop him from powering up the main batteries. "Hold. Let's see what they do next." A second later, more changes rippled across the display. Several panels along the Resolute's sides slid open, revealing missile tubes and railgun housings that had been hidden within the hull. The point defense grid shimmered faintly in the void, an active barrier designed to swat down incoming fire before it could reach them. "They've activated full defensive posture," the science officer said, his voice tense. "If we attack, they're ready to counter immediately." The communications officer's eyes flicked up from his console. "Captain, they've also begun electronic interference. Our long-range comms are degraded by 30%. They are not cutting us off completely, just limiting what we can send without encryption." "Why only 30%? Vorn asked. The officer hesitated. "It's a message. They want us to know they can do more." It was a show of capability without crossing the line into an act of war, a demonstration that the humans understood exactly how to put pressure without firing a shot. The weapons officer's hands twitched over the controls. "Captain, we should arm our weapons. If they are preparing to strike." Vorn cut him off sharply. "No. They are waiting to see if we overreact. Do you not see? This is measured, controlled. They are not here to die in a hopeless attack. They are showing us what they can do if we force them." The Resolute's captain had timed everything perfectly. This was not a desperate lone ship trying to bluff. This was a forward element holding the line until reinforcements arrived. Vorn felt a cold understanding settle in his chest. If this was how they operated with one small ship, what would their fleet be like? The human captain's voice came one last time before the channel closed. "We can end this as a conversation, Captain. Or we can end it as a battle neither of us forgets. Choose carefully." The screen went dark, leaving the image of the human vessel still locked on their flank, weapons primed, watching and waiting. The Resolute's captain had timed everything perfectly. This was not a desperate lone ship trying to bluff. This was a forward element holding the line until reinforcements arrived. Vorn felt a cold understanding settle in his chest. If this was how they operated with one small ship, what would their fleet be like? The human captain's voice came one last time before the channel closed. "We can end this as a conversation, Captain. Or we can end it as a battle neither of us forgets. Choose carefully." The screen went dark, leaving the image of the human vessel still locked on their flank, weapons primed, watching and waiting. The bridge of the Spear of Dusk felt heavy, as if the air itself had thickened. No one moved for several seconds after the channel closed. The image of the human vessel remained on the main display, steady and unshaken, as though it had all the time in the galaxy. Every flicker of its lights, every precise adjustment of its position, carried purpose. Vorn's eyes stayed fixed on it. "Status of incoming ships?" he asked quietly. The communications officer didn't look up from his console. "No change in readings, Captain. They're still on course. Estimated arrival, 51 minutes. The navigator glanced over. "That's fast for ships of that size. They must have high-output drives. And they're coming in tight formation." Vorn's claws tapped against the armrest, slow and steady. "They planned this. From the moment they detected us, they began the countdown." The science officer spoke, his voice low. "Captain, I've been studying the data they sent in those encrypted bursts earlier. I can't decode the content, but the packet sizes and frequencies suggest layered reports, position updates, detailed scans of us, possible tactical recommendations. They aren't just calling for help. They're feeding their fleet a complete engagement profile." The weapons officer gave a small, tense click of his mandibles. "By the time their ships arrive, they'll know exactly how to fight us." Vorn knew he was right. In Overth war doctrine, That level of preparation before an engagement was rare. But for the humans, it seemed routine. The Resolute adjusted course slightly, drifting closer, not close enough to breach standard buffer zones, but enough to press on the Overth crew's nerves. The human captain was still shaping the encounter, showing that her ship could hold this position indefinitely. The communications officer looked up sharply. Incoming transmission again, Captain. This time visual only. No audio. The screen flickered, revealing a slow scan of the Spear of Dusk itself. It was their own ship, displayed in sharp detail, the image rotating to show weak points in armor layers, shield node locations, and sensor array blind spots. The humans had sent it back to them like a mirror held up to their face. Several crew members shifted uncomfortably. The message was clear. They knew exactly where to hit. Vorn's mandibles pressed together in a hard line. They are letting us see their knowledge to make a point. Not bluffing. The weapons officer's hands hovered near his controls. Captain, if we are to fight, our best chance is before their reinforcements arrive. But Vorn didn't answer right away. He was weighing what he had seen, what he had heard in Captain Vance's voice. This wasn't the usual intimidation from a weaker power. This was the voice of someone who had been in this position before and survived. Someone who had likely faced greater odds and still forced the enemy to back away. The science officer leaned forward. Captain, there's something else. I've examined their ship's heat patterns and energy dispersal. They've modified their systems to hide power spikes before firing weapons. That means they could open fire without much warning. So they could strike first and make it look like we did, the navigator muttered. Or, the science officer replied, they could simply react faster than we can adjust. Vorn looked back at the image of the human vessel. It didn't move much, just subtle corrections to maintain perfect positioning. A hunter keeping the perfect range from its prey. The communications officer's console chimed. Captain, their captain is requesting a private channel. Direct to you only. Vorn hesitated, then gestured for it to be opened. The display dimmed, and Captain Mara Vance's face appeared. Her expression was calm, her eyes steady. Captain Vorn, she said evenly. You've seen enough to know how this will go. We can end this without bloodshed. But if you press forward, my reinforcements will not hesitate. Vorn studied her face. You speak as though you've done this before. I have, she replied simply. More times than I care to count. And every time we've learned more about how to win against forces stronger than us. You call this winning? Holding position until a bigger force arrives. It's winning without wasting lives, she said, her tone unshaken. If you think my people fight only with weapons, you misunderstand us. Our best victories come from making our enemies realize that the fight is not worth the cost. Her words hung in the air, quiet but sharp. What happens if I refuse? Vorn asked. Then we see if your ship can withstand the combined fire of mine and the others on the way, she said. We will fight to end it quickly, but we will fight without restraint. There was no anger in her voice, only certainty. Vorn recognized it. He'd heard it from veteran Overth commanders who had already decided the outcome before the battle began. I'll give you this, Captain Vance, Vorn said slowly. You've forced me to think carefully. That's all I ask, she replied. You know what is coming. Choose the path that spares you the most regret. The channel closed, and the screen returned to the image of the Resolute holding its calm, steady position. Vorn exhaled slowly. The humans had not fired a shot, but they had shifted the balance of control. They had shown their readiness, their precision, their reinforcements, and now they waited, knowing that time was on their side. The Overth captain leaned forward. Maintain defensive readiness, hold position, and prepare to send a message to their captain. The crew glanced at each other, unsure of what decision was forming. But they all felt it. The tide of this encounter had shifted, and it was no longer clear who held the advantage. The bridge lights seemed dimmer now, though nothing had changed. Every crew member aboard the Spear of Dusk could feel the weight of the moment pressing down. The human vessel hung in the void like a patient blade, gleaming faintly against the dark, its movements precise and deliberate. Time ticked forward, bringing those unknown reinforcements ever closer. "Captain," the communications officer said quietly, "we are within 40 minutes of contact with their fleet. Their formation has not altered. They are on a direct course here." Vorn didn't respond right away. His gaze was fixed on the Resolute. For all its smaller size, it radiated something dangerous, not through its weapons alone, but through the way it never flinched. Every maneuver it made told the same story. "We know what you can do, and we are ready for it." The science officer broke the silence. "Captain, they have not increased weapons power. No hostile lock. They are maintaining defensive posture only." The weapons officer's mandibles clicked sharply. "A trick. They want us to be the first to act so they can claim we started the fight." Vorn shook his head. "If they wanted to provoke us, they would have already pressed harder. No, they want us to understand exactly what kind of enemy they would be." The navigator looked uneasy. "And what kind is that?" Vorn's gaze stayed on the small ship. "One that wins by making others realize the cost of victory is too high." A chime sounded from the comms console. "Incoming transmission from Captain Mara Vance. Open channel." "Put it through," Vorn ordered. Her face appeared on the main display, calm as before, but there was no arrogance in her expression, just certainty. "Captain Vorn," she began, "my reinforcements are closing in. When they arrive, we will have overwhelming numbers. This is your last chance to leave this as a conversation and not a battle report." Vorn leaned forward. "You expect me to retreat without a fight?" "I expect you to make the best decision for your crew," Vance said evenly. "If you attack, we will respond without restraint. That is not a threat, it is a statement of fact. We fight to survive, Captain, and we make sure our enemies never try again." Her words were like cold steel, and they carried no bluster. The Overth captain could tell she meant every one of them. "You think your smaller ships and your so-called history of fighting stronger enemies will save you?" Vorn asked. Her lips curved slightly, though not into a smile. "It's already saved us more times than I can count. You've studied our records. You know that we adapt. We've been doing it for thousands of years." Vorn held her gaze for a long moment, then glanced at the countdown on his tactical display. The reinforcements were 35 minutes out now. Even if he engaged the Resolute immediately and destroyed it, the rest of their fleet would arrive to find the Spear of Dusk weakened, low on ammunition and far from support. It was a fight they could win, but not without heavy losses, and maybe not at all if the humans fought like their captain promised. "Why offer peace?" he asked finally. "You could have called your fleet in and attacked without warning." "Because we prefer it," Vance answered without hesitation. "Peace keeps our people alive, but peace only lasts when both sides respect each other. I'm showing you what we are so that if we meet again, it will be as equals, not as prey and predator." Her image faded as the transmission ended. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Every officer was waiting for his decision. Vorn stared at the screen for a few seconds longer, then spoke. "Navigation set a course away from human space. Weapons, keep all systems in standby until we are out of range. Comms, send a reply." The communications officer's claws hovered over the controls. "What should I tell them, Captain?" Vorn's eyes narrowed slightly, though not in anger. "Tell them the Overth Confederation accepts their offer of peaceful coexistence. And tell them, we will remember today." A few heads turned in surprise, but no one spoke. The order was carried out, and moments later the Spear of Dusk began to turn, gliding away from the human ship. The Resolute did not pursue. It merely adjusted its position, watching until the Overth vessel drifted out of close range. The sense of a predator's eyes on them never faded until the humans finally broke formation, holding their ground as the Spear of Dusk slipped into the deep void. Vorn stood from his chair. "Let this be a lesson to us all. Power is not only in weapons or size. Sometimes it is in the will to face any enemy and make them think twice." The crew absorbed his words in silence. Every one of them knew the truth. If this had gone to battle, There was no guarantee they would be returning home. Hours later, as the Spear of Dusk moved beyond the reach of human sensors, Vorn allowed himself a final glance at the tactical log. One entry stood out: species designation human. Recommendation: avoid underestimating. Extreme tactical adaptability. Potential apex predator. Somewhere behind them, the Resolute was already reforming its patrol, waiting for whatever came next. The Overth captain knew that this encounter would spread quickly through both empires. It would not be remembered as the day the Overth discovered a primitive species to conquer. It would be remembered as the day they realized the humans were ready for anything. And in the quiet of his command chamber, Captain Vorn admitted something he would never say aloud to his crew. He was relieved they had chosen to part ways without firing a single shot.